Welcome to Talk Fights. I'm Curtis Biggs. Today I'm joined again by my brother Adam Biggs, and we're going to talk about our 5 favorite boxers of all time. Now, this is not necessarily the best boxers of all time. There's definitely an argument to be had, but this is our personal favorites. For me, my number 5 favorite boxer of all time is Prince Naseem Hamed. A lot of people might be angry with me for saying that. A lot of people hated Prince Naseem Hamed, and I can understand why. He was very cocky, very in your face. Some of his walkouts were ridiculous. But an amazing fighter, and so much power for someone only 122 pounds. The guy hit like a middleweight.
Yeah. But you know what, when you think about it, a lot of guys build their fame on an attitude like that.
Absolutely.
On a persona like that. Tito Ortiz, even though like he got destroyed by Chuck Liddell and stuff like that, a big part of his game was that, you know, oh yeah, I'm wiping off the grave and whatever.
Definitely.
And, you know, all his attitude was a big part of his game, and that's why people liked him. Not to mention when you back it up with knockouts like Hamed did, then
that's right.
You know.
I mean, Hamed had that amazing war with Kevin Kelly, where they trade knockdowns. Hamed ended up stopping Kevin Kelly towards the end of it, after 4 rounds maybe. He knocked out Augie Sanchez, and his only loss on his record, he's 36-1 that he retired with. His only loss was to Marco Antonio Barrera. And there's no shame in losing to that guy. Barrera's a Hall of Famer, he's an all-time great. Now, he really beat up Naseem. But, what are you going to do? You win some, lose. Naseem was still pretty young. He retired young. To retire at 36, when he fought Barrera, lost to him badly. Took about a year off and came back, fought a guy I'd never heard of, beat him a decision, and then retired altogether. I think he just couldn't handle the loss.
Yeah, and to go out on a win was always a good plan.
Sure,
right?
No doubt. Who's your number 5?
Number 5, I got Canelo Alvarez,
Nice.
53-1-2. Obviously, he's got that draw with Triple G and the win over Triple G. I like him right now. He's definitely my favorite active fighter right now. There's nobody else out there that makes me want to go out and get a pay-per-view the way he does right now. He's got wins over, like I said, Triple G, Kovalev, Mosley, Miguel Cotto.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, he's got his losses to Mayweather, which just about everybody does. Yeah. So, you know, I like Canelo's story too. You know, like a 15-year-old kid fighting full-grown men for money in Guadalajara, Mexico. You know, it's a pretty cool story, and for him to be where he is and to move up. Like, for him to move up and fight Kovalev, I thought Kovalev might be too much for him.
So did I,
but he wasn't.
to be honest.
But he wasn't. And so that was really impressive to me. So that's where I put Alvarez on my number 5. But he's got room to grow. He could always move up that list too, because he's obviously still going.
Yep, no, Canelo Alvarez is great. He's an amazing fighter. I remember when he knocked out Amir Khan and destroyed him, just, you know, really knocked him out badly.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Amir Khan is the favorite in that fight by any means, but I don't know that people thought that.
But he's a bad dude nonetheless.
I mean, I think they thought his speed was going to be more beneficial to him than it was. It was a great fight for Canelo. Canelo's a great fighter.
Yeah, and I think other than like the Floyd Mayweather, you know, he shows even if he is the underdog, he shows he's got more than what you think he does. And like I said, even stepping up against Kovalev.
He had a good showing against Mayweather, and still a young guy though at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's why he gets my number 5.
My number 4 is Mike Tyson. Everybody loves Mike Tyson. You know, he's the king of the flash knockout. He's was again an amazing fighter. The knock on Mike Tyson is that some of the competition was maybe not as stiff as it should have been on his way up.
And the longevity.
Yeah, and the longevity, that's right. He didn't stick around as long as a lot of people would have liked to have seen him. Retired with a record of 50-6 with 44 knockouts. How do you not enjoy a guy like that?
Yeah, it's a respectable record, no doubt. A guy like Mike Tyson, I think, again, he's still, you know, he's talking about coming back. He's supposed to be fighting Roy Jones Jr. It's been put off. You never know what's going to happen. He looked good in the videos that we've seen. If he were to come back, he could change some of those things, the longevity and stuff like that, and maybe some of the competition. If he were to come back at his age, you never know where he could land on somebody's top favorite list. But definitely, obviously, when he was growing up, his knockouts were, you couldn't miss them.
No, definitely.
Right? You had to be there to see Mike Tyson and get his knockouts, and that's something everybody will remember from that era.
I'll give you my prediction on Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. right now. The fight never happened.
Yeah, guaranteed.
But yeah, Mike Tyson was great. What's your number 4?
Number 4, I got to go with Joe Calzaghe.
Nice.
You know, he fought a ton of guys. Right at the end of his career, he went out 46-0. At the end of his career, he fought Roy Jones Jr., he fought Bernard Hopkins, he fought Mikkel Kessler. 3 huge fights. So, I mean, for me, for him to go out on top of his game the way he was like that, that's absolutely huge. And
Joe Calzaghe was amazing. He's one of my favorite fighters as well. Not on my top 5 list, but Joe Calzaghe was great. It was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, he was 46-0, and to go out on top like that.
Yep.
Not just to, you know, he didn't just cruise his way at the end. His last 3 fights, those are 3 huge names, 3 legends in the game. Kessler maybe to a lesser extent, but Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. are absolutely, you know, Hall of Famers, and to finish his career on that, I think is and 46-0.
Yeah, definitely.
46-0.
Definitely.
Too. Right, I mean, not to mention, you know, 32 knockouts. He's an absolute beast. Anyway.
Had a winner over Jeff Lacey in there. Beat Chris Eubanks.
Yeah, he gave
Jeff
Lacey his first loss, I think. Right?
Yeah. Chris Eubanks was quite a contender, not a contender, quite a champion back in the day.
Simply the best.
Yeah, simply the best. And Calzaghe really took it to him. It was a great fight for Calzaghe. He was where he won his world championship.
Yeah, I think he's underrated. I think he's one of the underrated, you know, best ever. A lot of people don't talk about him. Maybe because they look at something like Floyd Mayweather getting that extra 4 and going 50-0. But I mean, I don't know. 46-0 is pretty good record. Yeah,
Definitely.
So he definitely gets my number 4 for that.
Awesome. So my number 3 is Roy Jones Jr. Who doesn't love Roy Jones Jr.? I mean, what an awesome fighter. What a great fighter to watch. What a fun fighter to watch.
Yeah, I love Roy Jones Jr. growing up. He's actually my number 3 on my list as well. Just everything. He was one of those fighters, every time he wanted to fight, you wanted to go see it.
Definitely.
The way, you know, he moved and the way he shook guys off and he made guys look like fools a lot of times. You know, just stepping back like it was like child's play. It was just a game. Amazing. It was a game for him.
The movement and the power. I mean, throwing triple and quadruple hooks and landing them all. I mean, just an amazing fighter. Great fighter to watch. Almost want to say, you know, what's better than Roy Jones Jr. in his prime? Not too much.
No, exactly. And when you think about it, in multiple division champion, you know, to go up at light heavyweight and then destroy guys like that, and then he even did come up. I think it was John Ruiz he beat for the heavyweight title. He's definitely one of the all-time greats, I think. Even though towards the end of his career he did start to have some losses, he doesn't want to give it up. Even now, I mean, if he were to fight Tyson, you never know. I'm not to say he doesn't have a good chance. You never know what could happen. But I mean, a lot of fighters tag on some of these losses at the end of their career, and if he didn't do that, then you never know. I mean, Roy Jones would be one of the greatest of all time, I think.
Was only lost for a long time was against Montel Griffin, and was a disqualification. Griffin went down, and Roy hit him while he was down on the ground, and Montel Griffin was not able to continue, or says he was not able to continue.
He was down on a knee. He wasn't down on the ground, right?
Right,
he was,
but down,
he was down, a downed opponent, yeah.
And so went a loss to Roy Jones Jr. Lost his title to Montel Griffin. Lost his disqualification.
Yep.
He fought him a short time later and absolutely destroyed Montel Griffin. Knocked him out in the first round horribly.
Yeah.
Griffin goes down from a left hook, gets up, falls down again, gets up, falls down again. It was like Mike Tyson and Trevor Berbick. It was just destruction from Roy Jones. So what about number 2?
Number 2, I gotta go with my man Evander Holyfield. I think his record was 44-10. He fought a ton of guys. He beat George Foreman. He beat Mike Tyson. He lost to Lennox Lewis, which there's no shame in that. He fought a ton of other guys. Again, I've always said he got absolutely robbed against Valuev in one of his last title fights. But for me, Evander Holyfield was one of those guys that grew up watching or playing Real Deal Boxing. Evander Holyfield,
Yeah.
Real Deal Boxing.
Great game.
Absolutely great game for Sega Genesis. I mean, so that helped form my opinion of him right off the hop. But then watching him, like I said, you know, he was one of the greatest cruiserweights of all time.
Yeah.
And they said he was probably too small to be a heavyweight. But I mean, I don't think he was. I mean, he beat guys like Michael Moore and George Foreman
Well, Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson. I mean,
other than Buster Douglas, the first person to really show that Mike Tyson was human, showed that there was a formula for beating that guy that Holyfield was able to follow to a T.
Yeah, Holyfield did beat Buster James Douglas.
Very quickly.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So I mean, Holyfield, and again, like I've always said, that he's underrated, but he's always been one of my favorites.
Yep. My number 2 is Joe Louis. He had a record of 67 wins with only 3 losses. His 3 losses were, had one to Max Schmeling early in his career. He came back and avenged that loss to Schmeling by knockout in one of the biggest sporting events of all time. And then late in his career, after his retirement, he came back and lost the decision to Ezra Charles, and was then knocked out by Rocky Marciano in his final fight at 37 years old. But other than those few losses, completely understandable losses, was just an amazing fight. One my second all-time favorite.
Yeah, not to discredit Ezra Charles or Rocky Marciano, obviously, but like we've talked about, guys later, you know, in their career, end up taking several losses sometimes, maybe when they probably should have hung them up already, but the competitor in them just won't let it go. Joe Louis, again, like you said, absolute Hall of Famer, unstoppable back in the day, just destroying people. I mean, there's a reason why they had Joe Louis Arena, right?
That's
there's a reason why there's, you know, Joe Louis statues in Detroit. Sorry, statues, the fist, you know, same idea.
Yep. No, Joe Louis was great. I mean, he had 2 knockout wins over Billy Conn. He knocked out Jersey Joe Walcott, knocked out Max Schmeling, knocked out all kinds of guys. 2-ton Tony Galento, you know, a whole bunch of very, very tough guys. And it was also the most successful champion of all time. Has 25 defenses at heavyweight. But that is the most defensive any weight class of any fighter in boxing ever.
Yeah, again, like we said, another one of those guys who's just had a crazy amount of amateur and professional fights and been successful all the way along, and been a top shelf fighter, like from start to finish. Joe Louis was great.
Yeah, absolutely. So who's your number 1?
My number 1, I got Sugar Ray Robinson.
Nice.
He's got 174 wins, 19 losses, and 6 draws. You know, he won several weight classes, like we've talked about before. You know, he said to be one of the greatest welterweight of all time. But I mean, he moved up several times. He fought just about everybody. Had the 5 absolute wars with Jake LaMotta.
6 actually.
6, yeah, okay, yeah, right, exactly. So, you know, he had 109 knockouts, and his amateur record, he was 85-0. Sugar Ray Robinson. Usually on my favorites, I try to stick with guys that I know, that I watched, that really influenced my feeling on boxing. But Sugar Ray Robinson, obviously, I wasn't around for any of his fights. But unbelievable, the amount of fights, the amount of knockouts, the caliber of fighters, and just the different weight classes that he went. Sugar Ray Robinson, I think, is a lot of people's pound for pound and all-time favorite.
Definitely. I mean, Sugar Ray Robinson just had so much skill, so much power, so much speed. You know, such a high ring IQ. I mean, he really knew what he was doing, as well as anybody ever. Back and forth fights with Gene Fulmer. You know, the stoppage of Jacob Monte in their 6th fight. Knockout of Randy Turpin, rematch. Knockouts of Fritzy Zivik, I mean, knockout of Rocky Graziano.
Rocky Graziano, that straight right hand. Yeah,
It
that
was,
was
an unbelievable record.
yeah, no, Robinson again, another one of those guys. For me, what I love is I love guys that are able to move up, that are able to fight bigger guys. That even though they may be, like you say, he was the greatest welterweight of all time. But I mean, but again, he did move up,
Yeah.
and he fought guys that were probably bigger than him that he probably should have lost to. That, you know what, he was just a real tough dude, and,
Absolutely.
and he was able to get the win.
Fought Joy Maxson for the light heavyweight championship. Came up short, but I mean, even just to be there fighting for it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you got to give a lot of respect to a guy like that, and I think definitely my all-time favorite is Sugar Ray Robinson.
Awesome. So for myself, it's no secret to you, no secret to anybody else who's ever watched a few of my shows, is Muhammad Ali. Just such an awesome fighter, awesome person, but I mean, even just strictly boxing, such an amazing boxer. You don't get a nickname like the greatest if you suck. You know, he was pretty good.
Yeah, well, Muhammad Ali's always in the question when you talk about the greatest of all time for different sports. You know, like hockey's Wayne Gretzky, and
Sure.
boxing is always Muhammad Ali. People
Definitely.
talk about him being the greatest.
Always in the
and it's for a
conversation,
reason. It's exactly. He was, you know, he had that attitude. He had that persona that people loved. People, you know, even the people that didn't love him, they loved to hate him.
Sure, as long as you buy
he
a ticket, they win, right?
Exactly. And he had always put on a show. He was obviously one of the, you know, the toughest chin and hardest punchers and best skill fighters the heavyweight division has ever seen. Fought anybody and everybody, and won and lost to champions. But yeah, definitely Muhammad Ali is one of the greatest ever.
Absolutely. I mean, he doesn't get the credit I think he deserves for his power. He's not known as a power fighter, but of his 56 wins, he had 37 knockouts, and of guys that were tough as nails. I mean, he stopped Ron Lyle, he stopped Floyd Patterson twice, he stopped Jerry Corey twice, he stopped Sonny Liston twice. He knocked out George Foreman, he knocked out Zora Foley, he knocked out Cleveland Williams. I mean, just an unbelievable list of the toughest guys in the world, and arguably the greatest ever era of the heavyweight division, and he was the king.
And just because you didn't have knockout power like Mike Tyson, a lot of times guys don't get that credit. They say, oh, he's not a knockout puncher. But, like you said, 37 knockouts, I mean, that's
37 knockouts.
That's a lot of knockouts in the heavyweight division. Like you said, when you're fighting the who's who,
that's right.
to stop a lot of those guys, that's a pretty big deal.
Huge, huge. So those are our top 5. There's so many boxers out there. The Marquis Queensborough rule has been around since, I don't know, 1898 or something along those lines.
A million. There's a million guys you could have picked.
So, I mean, we have 100 plus years of boxing history. So many guys. There's so many other ones I would like to mention, would like to have talked about, but we don't have all day. A couple of my honorable mentions were Floyd Patterson for one. He was 55 knockouts, and then 55 knockouts. He was 55 wins and 8 losses with 40 knockouts, and I just love Floyd Patterson. Seemed like a really nice guy. You see him in interviews. You see him even after fights. He was always very respectful. He was never gloating over his opponents, but was really a killer in the ring. His fights with Ingemar Johansson were amazing. His 2 fights with Sonny Liston didn't work out so well for him. But I knocked out Archie Moore. Floyd Patterson was fantastic. Some of the other guys I wanted to mention were Mickey Ward. Not maybe the greatest fighter ever, but certainly, you know, a very skilled boxer. And other guys just tough as nails. Had an iron chin. Was always coming forward. Of course, we've seen the fights with him and Arturo Gatti, the 3 fights.
Yeah, Gotti's awesome.
Arturo Gatti as well, a guy that kind of should have made my list, or almost made my list. Sugar Ray Leonard, another guy that I loved, you know, an attacker, a flashy fighter, just fantastic. But again, there's a million guys. Who else would have made your list, or almost made your list?
You know what I mean? Like you said, there's a ton of guys. Gotti, Mosley, Felix Trinidad, a million other fighters that we love to watch. But another guy I think that would have really made my list was George Foreman.
Sure.
Another huge, slugger, who a lot of guys said was the hardest puncher that they ever faced.
Definitely.
One of my favorite fights of all time is George Foreman and Ron Lyle. I mean, George Foreman was 76-5. He had a ton of knockouts. He crushed a lot of guys. George Foreman is definitely one of my honorable mentions. Lennox Lewis, another big heavyweight.
Fought out of Canada, was from England, but did fight out of Canada. Won a gold medal for Canada at the Olympics.
Another guy beat a lot of tough guys. Lennox Lewis was a big deal for me growing up.
Definitely.
And then you got to give that honorable mention to Floyd Mayweather.
Sure.
His 50-0. We've talked about this before. When he fought Conor McGregor on his last one, they were saying, "Oh, Mayweather's not a knockout artist, but McGregor is." Well, Mayweather has more knockouts than fucking McGregor has fights.
Absolutely. At the time,
yeah.
It still does.
And he still does. and Mayweather 50-0, and he fought a ton of guys. He beat another guy on my list, Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, beat Canelo Alvarez soundly, I thought. One of the judges made it a draw somehow. I thought it was a clear-cut win for him.
But you know what, it goes back and forth sometimes, because I know another good friend of mine, Jordan West, who thinks Triple G beat Canelo soundly.
That was a close fight.
Almost both times. I thought Canelo won both of those fights. So I mean, it's all subject to who's watching it.
That's right, and where you're sitting on.
But I mean, like you said, there's a million guys you could talk about. We could talk all night about great fighters and great knockouts, and So I think those are the ones that I wanted to make mention for sure.
Yep, and myself as well. Those are my top 5, and I've always enjoyed watching them. That's why I chose them. Not so much that I think they're the best fighters, but they're my personal favorites and some of the fighters I find the most fun to watch.
Well, for sure. Like I said, for me, and things, fighters that had influence on you, even if it was something like the Sega Genesis game of Evander Holyfield, Real Deal Boxing, had influence, made me want to watch Evander Holyfield fights. And then, I mean, he turned out to be obviously amazing anyway, but yeah, definitely his favorites. Not maybe the list of the greatest of all time, but my favorites for sure.
Absolutely. See you at the fights. All right.
Yes.
My secret power is fatness.
I knew that was good.
You knew it. Oh, throwing gloves, dirty pool.